Commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. President Biden was in Buffalo today mourning the victims of the most recent shooting, of which, according to CNN, there's been more than 200 this year, mass shootings. And again, this is one of those moments you go, I think we're getting past the pandemic, COVID in the rearview mirror. At least mentally, we're thinking that. Especially since today I find out that potentially, I'll find out tomorrow once I get tested, maybe I am getting all the way through the pandemic. Maybe now I have been exposed to it. Because yesterday spent some time with Pennsylvania gubernatorial candidate and now winner of the Democratic primary here in Pennsylvania for the Democratic primary. Josh Shapiro is going to be the nominee in November. But this morning he tweeted out that yes, indeed, he has tested positive for COVID, and yes, I did spend a lot of intimate time yesterday with him. So therefore, congratulations. I may have been exposed to COVID, and I am not all too thrilled about it. So test tomorrow. I got something on the agenda. But good on Josh Shapiro for his victory. Look, still waiting for the results of the other important race here on the Democratic side. What's going to happen in the Senate race? Early results. John Fetterman, who was leading, he is still leading. He was leading in the polls going in. He's leading with the results coming in. The interesting part, going to see who on the Republican side will be the governor, the Republican choice in November to run for governor, also for Senate. But we'll get to all of that stuff. But the president was in Buffalo, called for stricter gun laws. We do this stuff. It's not going to happen. Also, calling out white supremacy, saying, look, you can't remain silent. And in this moment, we can't. You've got to call out the people who are doing this. And, yesterday got tons of responses from my opening. And it's like a lot of people have never heard of the replacement theory, which I gotta say, I'm kind of shocked by the number of people who claim they had never heard of it. And yet, the New York Times did a piece where they documented more than 400 times where the bow-tied one, Tucker Carlson over at the F Channel, has referenced it over the last couple of years. This is part of the mainstream Republican mantra. This is part of what it's part of the anti-immigration stuff. It's part of what they've been saying, for years. This is not new. And what's interesting to me is, today you got people condemning Tucker Carlson like, oh my goodness, this is new. I'm not condemning Tucker Carlson. This is who he is. It's who he's always been. There's nothing new here. To condemn him now is to admit that evidently you haven't condemned the shtick of the past. All of the prior outrage, this is just the latest in a string of ridiculousness. And the weird thing is, and understand this, I don't know Tucker Carlson. I don't know if he believes what comes out of his mouth or if it's all just performative. I have met a lot of these hate mongers and homophobes and racists and misogynists over the years. I've gone to the conferences where they congregate. And what I've come around to believe is that they know what their base needs. I I I believe they know that the throngs of minions, that the chaos merchants like Tucker Carlson, like Sean Hannity, O'Reilly, that bongo guy, the crack-addled little rat Shapiro, not Josh, that Ben Shapiro. They know what their addicts need, and they're ready, willing, like any pusher. They're willing to help their junkies get the fix that they need, of course, for a price. Because after all, this is all about money. This is all about money. It's about power and control. And I look at this in this moment going, they're feeding the outrage candy to their throngs. The chaos merchants who are peddling this stuff for a price, for a profit. And then saying, oh, well, we didn't, not us. Not us. Yeah, they used our rhetoric to justify their 180-page manifestos that gave them the basis to go out into a black neighborhood and shoot up a supermarket. Yeah, but that's on them. It's not us. We're pure as the driven snow. We're just asking questions. Can't we just ask questions anymore? Can't we just speak truth? This bongo guy, Dan Bongino, the quote that he's been circulating, telling his minions, do not be intimidated. Speak the truth. There is power and truth. There's a coordinated effort, he says, to use bloodshed and death in Buffalo to advance totalitarianism, to advance the connected elite oligarchy censorship mechanisms, and to politically target you and to shut you down. Yeah, it's going to take the tragedy of 10 people being murdered in cold blood and turn it into a rallying cry for more hatred, for more misogyny and racism and anger. Because by pointing out that the people who are pushing the replacement theory, people pushing the other isms, are causing this, are giving the dim license to go and do horrible things, somehow that's trying to shut down their free speech, trying to target them because they speak the truth. It's crazy. But, they know that their base, their addicted, outrage candy fed base needs this to feel victimized. Like somehow they're the real victims in all of this. Ben Shapiro says, quote, all of MSNBC has centralized on the narrative that Tucker Carlson, who happens to be their actual media competition, must be destroyed. No, it's calling out what he's doing. It's using his actual words to say this is who he says he is. When do we believe him? Now, as I said, I don't know whether he believes it or not. Don't know the man personally. Been in a room with him once. Don't know him. Know what he says. Know what positions he takes. Don't know him personally. Don't know how much of it is shtick. Don't know, like I said, how much of it is performative. How much of it is, hey, this is feeding the masses what they want. Just giving the people what they want. What they need. And it's interesting because today is an important day. Historically, today's an interesting and important day. Today's the 68th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education decision. And, this is one of those moments where in a functional system, we could have an honest discussion around, was it a good decision? Was it a bad decision? Was it implemented properly? With an educated populace, you could have this discussion. In an education system, you might want to be able to go back and examine that in a functional school system, that would be a topic of discussion, I think. But nowadays, to talk about that, that's critical race theory. What? Because anything talking about anything outside of we are the perfect country, we are exceptional, the underdog always wins, this kind of idealistic Americana that the right seems to love to paint. Anything outside of that is, well, unacceptable. And we could throw into the CRT category. It's bad. It's bad. And any book that talks about it has to be burned. But replacement theory, oh, front and center. Every night on display on the F channel and all of the other right-wing rags. And really, honestly and truthfully, part and parcel of the Republican Party. This is who they've been for a very long time. Now, they used to be kind of ashamed about it. They used to do it with dog whistle. They used to do it with coded language. Now they're barking it right out, as loud and as proud as they can. The GOP is the proud boy of politics. And I'm waiting for that representative to come forward and say, yeah, that's us. Now, I look back at some of the writings today, because I did read a little bit about where people's mindset is on the 68 years since that 1954 landmark Supreme Court ruling that undid the idea of separate but equal and desegregated our schools. And there are some who go, look, it was one of the worst things that ever happened to the black community. And you can look at it that way. I remember when we did our civil rights tour a couple of years ago. We were in Jackson, Mississippi. And the guy who was the head of the NAACP down there took us on a tour of what had been Black Wall Street. And he walked us, all around and said, there used to be, this business and that business. And he explained how the area worked at the time. This is before Brown versus Board of Education, before the push to desegregate. And he said, look, we had an entire economy built around black-owned businesses, an entire travel economy around the Green Book, where, you had a black middle class that was built. And as soon as this decision, and he was not a fan, as soon as this decision happened, all of that was eviscerated. And it was the first time that I had ever heard anyone speak negatively of that Supreme Court decision. Because I was always taught in school, this was a huge advancement forward. This was a great thing. This was the country, righting wrongs of the past. I had never heard the other side. And this is part of what education, I think, should be, and what a functional democracy should be about. Having a discussion on whether a policy decision, whether a Supreme Court decision was conceived properly and then implemented properly. But we can't have that in this country because we've got fire breathers and people like the F channel who have such an outweighted microphone and play to the least of us and play to the worst in us, that we can't have those discussions that will make us better, that will truly make us a great country. And that's the scary part of where we are. And it's frustrating. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. I'm curious, your thoughts. Are they just speaking the truth? Or is it worse than that? Quick break. If you miss any of the program, make sure you grab our podcast. Share the podcast with your friends. Like, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating if you will. Also make a comment. Love to see that as well. Quick break. Back after this. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today's an important day in the midterm world. Super Tuesday, if you will. You've got midterms. You've got primary day in Kentucky, North Carolina, here in my state of Pennsylvania, Idaho, Oregon. Lots of decision-making happening. Here in Pennsylvania, some big races. And for me, going to find out just how crazy our state's going to be maybe in November. On the Republican side, wow, potentially way off the deep end on where the Republican Party has gone. And I'm waiting for those results as we speak. But yeah. Now, what's interesting is you see some of the polling, and this is where it's important to me. I think the Republican Party really has shown, because look, none of the Republicans in this state have gotten the majority. I mean, their numbers are, each of them are in the 20 range. They're going to have an uphill climb in the general, getting everybody back into the fold. This is where, talking about the issues that are important and having a plan on how to get forward is important, which I think why this recent Pew survey is kind of important in talking about what really is important to Americans and what's worrying them. Obviously, inflation is the big thing. Most people are worried about, hey, how am I gonna put food on the table? How am I gonna pay the bills? But close second is healthcare. How are we gonna make sure that we have health security? For instance, look, I have no concern whatsoever about if I get sick, if I do have COVID, that I'm going to be able to get the care that I need. Now, am I going to worry about if I get sick, how sick I'm going to get and all that? Yeah, but I'm going to worry about getting well. I don't worry about the cost because I know I've got good health insurance that my union fought for and all of that. I want that for everybody. And this is one of those things that families worry about at night. We should have policies that move us in that direction. And then really close after that are violent crime and gun violence. We are seeing real problems, and a lot of it's in the news, but we're seeing really problems. Another thing that they pointed out is federal budget deficits. I don't know why the average person is worried about federal budget deficits. I don't know how that is so high on the list when you start looking at some of the other things like education and unemployment and the virus. I have no idea why budget deficits is above climate change. But there it is. And for me, this is one of those moments where run on issues that are going to make people's lives better, that are going to get us back into the center of the road. Run on policies that are going to, especially on the Democratic side. This is why I like John Fetterman, who's running for Senate here in Pennsylvania. When he talks about issues, it's about how are we going to move families forward? How are we going to make sure that when he was mayor of Braddock, one of the poorest communities in the state of Pennsylvania, it was about how are we going to make sure that those folks in his community could feed their kids, keep a roof over their head, get clothing. They used to do just amazing things around, free store, pop-up stores and things where they would bring resources in to help the community. It was about that kind of community. It was about that kind of, we're all in this together. And I think we can do those things. I think we're capable of doing that. But somehow we got to tear down this right-wing barrier, this stuff that is deliberately thrown in our way to divide us, deliberately thrown in our way to ensure that we never talk to each other and never get near each other. Because, ultimately, I do think we agree on a lot of the same things. And this is this frustrating part of this. When you look at inflation, it hurts all of us. It isn't. There's no party that gets off of. There's no ideology that gets away from this. Yeah, I know. But Rick, the very wealthy gets away. Yeah, they do, because it doesn't matter to them. But if you're a working person, it doesn't matter which team you're on. Yeah, I found it interesting that Jeff Bezos, one of the richest guys in the country, was thanking Joe Manchin, for stopping Joe Biden from making things worse, buying into the idea that Biden had spent giving you $1,400 somehow inflated the economy to the point to where we just can't possibly spend anymore. Whereas when Trump gave away the $1,800 to every person and the $1.9 trillion to the very wealthy, that didn't matter. But the second they started talking about how we're going to help you, how we're going to help your family, how we're going to invest in your future and my future, then that somehow became too much. Understand what they're telling us. Understand what they're doing to us. And then hold them accountable for it. What I see in front of us is simple. Corporate America is gouging us. They see an opportunity, good old-fashioned American greed, and they're gouging our eyes out, man. They're taking advantage of this moment because they know it's not going to last long. They know that eventually the Fed's going to raise interest rates to the point to where they're not going to get the cheap money like they used to, and eventually there's going to be enough unemployment to bring down the kind of, and this is what they want, because they don't want you to have options in jobs, because right now jobs are plentiful, which means that people have the ability to change jobs, and the Great Resignation gives us opportunity to go, I'm not taking this, I'm going across the street. And that raises wages, and they hate that. Understand what is happening. The Business Roundtable and the people who really control what's going on, they know what they're doing. They're making a huge amount of profit because they can, and they're beginning to figure out how to tap down our ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions. They're going to crush the organizing that's going on one way or another, and part of that is by saying we're going to just cause inflation to the point to where you squeal. And the fact that Bezos uses Manchin as as the example is sadly laughable, but not surprising. We are in most certainly interesting times, which is why come election time, we need to vote for pro-worker candidates, for people who understand this and people who are going to push policies that are going to make things better for the working class of this country, who are going to fight for better healthcare access, better educational access, better opportunities for you and me. That's my thought. Love to hear yours. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Also, remember, never miss an episode, never miss a moment. Make sure you grab the podcast. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Scott Paul from the Alliance for American Manufacturing is going to be here to share some thoughts. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day 4,000 strikers and their supporters gathered for the March for Dignity and Respect in Laurel, Mississippi. Over 200 mostly black women members of the International Chemical Workers Union Local 882 had been on strike against Sanderson Farms chicken processing plant for 15 months. Trade unionists from as far away as Cincinnati, Memphis, and North Carolina came to march in support. Sanderson Farms had cleared $58 million in profit, but paid workers just $3 an hour. The women demanded a contract that included more control over assembly line speed, overtime pay, and insurance. They complained of desperately low wages, inhumane working conditions, and even the inability to use the bathroom when necessary. Workers were given only gloves and an apron once a month, and a file to sharpen their often dull and rusty scissors and knives. They often referred to the processing plant as the plantation, where sexual harassment was rampant. Women workers often found themselves given dangerous assignments or even fired if they didn't put up with sexual advances of their foreman. Workers maintained that strikebreakers from the community were desperately poor and threatened with violence if they quit by local Ku Klux Klansmen who worked as supervisors at the plant. Some were known to have been involved in the murder and or intimidation of civil rights workers in decades past. The plant had been organized in 1972, but was extraordinarily weak. Nonetheless, women strikers understood that the union still served as an invaluable resource in the midst of a largely unorganized South. By the following February, the NLRB ruled that Sanderson had to resume contract negotiations and allow strikers to return to their jobs. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
When Supreme Court member Sam Alito's secret plan for canceling the constitutional right of women to end their pregnancies leaked out to the public, Republican politicos went ballistic. Over the leak, that is. The court's Republican Chief Justice John Roberts called the unauthorized disclosure, quote, an affront to the majesty of the Supremes. Likewise, Republican congressional leaders have furiously demanded to know who done it and why. Way beyond the political screeching and posturing, however, a Pennsylvania woman quietly wrote a letter to the New York Times that calmly posed a couple of honest, more fundamental questions. Why are Supreme Court votes and processes so hidden in the first place? And how did this grip on secrecy become so sacrosanct? After all, as important and enormously powerful as this tiny judicial body is, it's still a governmental agency doing public business that affects every American. So the legal work that the 9 members of this ultimate judicial authority do, including their internal machinations to reach such awesome decisions as nullifying fundamental human rights, ought to be transparent to all who will be affected. The ugly truth is that today's third branch of government has needlessly, dangerously, and rather ludicrously become a black-robed autocracy. Bear in mind that these 9 individuals are enrobed for life, make up their own rules of ethical conduct, operate almost entirely behind closed doors, and the bare majority of only 5 of them can arbitrarily overrule presidents, congresses, states, other courts, voters, and your own personal life decisions. This is Jim Hightower saying, and now comes a GOP majority of Supreme Justices determined to entrench corporate plutocracy, right-wing theocracy, and Republican sovereignty over all of us. That's why we must finally lift the medieval level of secrecy the partisan judges are using to shroud their actions.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So with gas prices where they are, and I don't know anybody who's thrilled, except for maybe ExxonMobil and Shell and BP and all of the executives there who are reaping enormous profits at our expense. But none of the working folks I know thrilled with the cost of gas. And oh, by the way, I know where I live, the electric company is going to start gouging us just a little bit more with a massive rate increase. I saw that's coming about 32%, I think. We should see our bills go up. So it's a perfect time to go, well, a perfect time would have been 30 years ago, but now is a perfect time to go, hey, how about some alternative energy, like maybe some solar panels like I have got on my house? And I'm sure glad I did that, 10 years ago. We should be doing this across the board. Now, what's interesting is you've got a small solar company who's got some values saying, hey, how about we make those here, or at least not with slave labor? Seems reasonable, seems rational, but no, we've got folks saying, no, we want slave labor. Here to share some thoughts on this story that I'm looking at the Wall Street Journal paper, the newspaper of the investor class. They call this Auxin Solar the most hated solar company in America. That's why I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is great to be with you as always.
So the most hated solar company in America, this very small company out in California, has said, hey, maybe make it here, or at least somewhere that doesn't abuse its workers. Kind of refreshing to me.
Yeah. It's. I mean, there are consequences, I guess, to speaking truth to power, huh? And I guess you develop a reputation like Auxin which is the name of the company. It's based in California, and they manufacture there. Yeah, the background on this is something else. I mean, we, like you, I mean, I fully agree. I think solar is one of the energy sources of the future. Residential, commercial, utility scale. I think we gotta do it. We have a comparative advantage in sun in the United States of America. We're well positioned to make it a cheap form. But the problem has been the business model that the solar installers have used for a couple of decades now is to bring in cheap stuff from China. This will sound familiar, and at the expense of growing manufacturing in the United States. And this is exactly the rub, because there have been tariffs in place on some types of Chinese solar modules, or the stuff that goes into making a solar panel, since the Obama administration, actually for 10 years. Trump administration went a step further with tariffs in 2018. And by the way, I will say the solar installers, the solar developers, and the finishers in the United States all said the sky was going to fall when Trump put these tariffs on solar. The next year, actually, solar jobs went up, solar installations went up, the cost went down for on a kilowatt per hour basis for solar. And so here we have a company saying, you know what, those Chinese duties have been pretty effective. They've limited the Chinese imports of solar into the United States. But what's happening is the Chinese companies appear to be routing these solar panels through companies in Malaysia, in Vietnam, and in some other Asian countries, and then into the United States, because imports from 4 countries have surged and basically have replaced all the Chinese imports, and none of these countries really had like a domestic solar manufacturing capability.
Well,
right?
That's convenient.
Yeah, exactly. So they've all kind of been routed through there. In trade parlance, we call that circumvention. Right, you're trying to work around a tariff, and it's a strategy that many have employed, and so Auxin, this company, kind of noticed this and said, you know what, this is not right, and they had the gall to file in what's called a circumvention case at the Commerce Department, which is, by the way, routine. I mean, this happens all the time in steel, in other sectors, except for this time. The solar industry has its hair on fire because its very business model is at risk here. I mean, it depends on these subsidized imports, either directly or indirectly, from China. And on top of the subsidies, which they get from the Chinese government, Rick, as you pointed out, unfortunately, the base material for a lot of these, the polysilicon, is manufactured in Xinjiang. And we know from reports and from on-the-ground evidence that much of that is made by forced labor, by Uyghurs, who are not there of their own accord in the factory. So it is it's a big challenge, and it goes back to something, and I know we have talked about this virtually every week for a while, is that we shouldn't just trade foreign oil for made in China solar. That's not a good trade-off. Let's make it here. And I think the disruption to the business model is the thing that is freaking the big solar industry out. And so, this case, it's going to take a while to decide, a few months, but there's already, the big solar folks want to stop it in its tracks before it even gets started. They can't do that, by the way, but they'd like to, if they could.
But this is where not having a domestic manufacturing base, is a problem. This is why, I go back to the Obama years, and I remember all of my conservative friends, losing their minds over, we put so much money into Solyndra, and we put all this money into solar. Yeah, you have to put money into these industries to help prop them up for a short period of time. We have to be investing in this stuff to get them going, as we did with the oil industry. How many subsidies have we given the oil industry over the years? They didn't pull themselves up by the bootstraps. They didn't get investor money to do this stuff. We've been subsidizing them for decades. How about we, think about that here and build domestic capacity, because we can build them here, right? I mean, this isn't something where we need the Chinese, right?
That's exactly right. And when it all shakes out, when you scale up the demand in the U.S. market, and it has been increasing quite a bit, Rick, I think, as you know, and we've seen that growth in the residential and the commercial and the utility scale, and so the demand is going to be there. The question is, where's the supply going to come from? Now, in the past, I think this is fair to say, I don't think that the installers or whoever knew that the demand was going to be here, right? Because our policy has been kind of, has been up and down on this for the last couple of decades. I think it's irreversibly up now, just because the cost differential is good for solar, and so I think that's good. I think that's excellent headed into the future, when you're just looking at it from a financial perspective. But the problem now is going to be that we're so dependent on these imports, that the solar companies haven't done. And so here's the thing. This is what gets me. The fossil fuel industry, as you know, very dependent on bringing stuff in from overseas, right? From the Middle East, from Venezuela, from the North Sea, from other places. But realized that a lot of that gets out of their control, and invested heavily in domestic production of natural gas and oil. And we've seen that surge in the United States. Obviously, that creates serious climate problems, but it showed that at least that industry kind of understand that you needed to get some domestic capacity online. Here's one thing that the solar folks should take as an example, is like, you need to scale up your domestic capacity here. It's going to be good for your costs in the long run to be able to control more of it and not to depend on unreliable suppliers like China, and also to sacrifice your moral values in the process. And it's going to be illegal, by the way, to import things from Xinjiang that are made with the slave labor, basically starting in June.
Yeah.
So it's time to cut that stuff off and to invest here in the United States.
No, and this is where we need policy to do this. And it seems to me, and look, I look at solar as something that the free market is never going to invest in, because there's no way that they're going to be able to make monthly profits off of me putting solar panels on my roof. At least I can't figure out how that's going to happen. How they're going to be able to make long-term profits off of me being energy independent. I think we as taxpayers, we as a country should be investing in huge solar farms. You look at, we've got deserts, we've got massive amounts of basically worthless space where we could throw up entire massive solar farms, could probably provide energy for half the country for nothing, for just the cost of the panels, and it would be there for almost ever.
Yeah, no, you're right. Concentrated solar power and a lot of the field. I mean, there's so, again, as I said, we have a comparative advantage in sun. We should be kicking butt in solar, and we are scaling it up. But we have to. You're right. We have to have that domestic production policy. But here's what the solar, the critics of this trade case say. Well, that's what we should do. We should have clean energy tax credits to help make the stuff here. We don't need this trade enforcement. And I say that's wrong. You need both. You got to do both, because unless you can have all the incentives in the world right here in the United States, but if those subsidized, or dumped imports are coming in, those are the things that are going to get utilized by the contractors, by the installers, because they're going to make better margins.
Yeah.
So you have to level that playing field, and that does involve trade enforcement. And the unfortunate thing about this, Rick, is that there are a lot of Democrats, some of whom are progressive, who have bought hook, line, and sinker, kind of like this big solar industry argument on this trade case, and say, it's like an existential threat to climate change efforts is what they are claiming, which is completely wrong. And so the problem is that a lot of these big solar companies in the United States, now there are a few that are domestic, like that have production in Ohio or are based here, but most of them are Asian or even Chinese. And so they have, they have other motivations here. They want to keep their operations in Asia busy as well. They don't have that interest in locating the production in the United States. And so trade enforcement actually helps with that. We know that from steel. We know that from the battery investments that we've seen, that if you have a comprehensive policy, you can, in fact, do that stuff right here at home. It'll be close to your customers. I mean, the U.S. is going to be a massively expanding solar market over the next couple of decades.
Yeah, you're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Scott Paul. Scott's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website. Make sure you check that out and the incredible work that they do. Fighting for American jobs, American manufacturing, domestic production for domestic consumption. And this is one of those issues that I think is really, really important. Because you mentioned climate change. I mean, if we're going to fight climate change, the jobs have to be part of this. We need to bring this in and create those jobs here at home and make sure that people have the ability to get those. But also, for me, the other important part of this is that we have control of those products, that we're making those, and that we make the replacements for it, and that they don't suck.
Right. That's right. So, I mean, you raise a couple of key points. One of which, look, we know from the last couple of years that the more control you have over your supply chain, which means the more that you're making here at home, the fewer risks you're going to entail from unpredictable events, whether it's weather or some shipping bottleneck or, say, a pandemic, Rick, like we just went through. And so why they haven't learned that lesson yet, God, I have a hard time understanding that. It's because they haven't necessarily had to bear the costs. Ultimately, they may. But the other thing about this is that, in this quest to go solar, which I believe is very important, we should not be sacrificing other environmental values as well. The conditions under which that polysilicon in Xinjiang are produced is with coal-fired plants. It is very old school. So you have slave labor, you have coal-fired plants, and then you have China saying, you know what, let's route this through some other countries so it's not subject to the duties, and the installers are like, that's great because we'll make more money. And so, you know what, let's have a level playing field. Let's do this the right way. And as you suggest, let's invest heavily in this, in the capital costs, because just like with fossil fuels, oil and gas, that's what we do. It's expensive to set up exploration or whatever. We should offset the costs of standing up solar in the United States, because we'll have a great ROI in terms of our climate goals and in terms of being able to get more of this for consumers who ultimately will save money on their electricity. I'll bet you like your electricity bill a lot better since you installed the solar.
We produce about 40% of our electricity with our panels, and I wish I could do more. Let's get Mike from Los Angeles on the phone with a question. You got a question for Scott, Mike?
No, I don't have a question. I have a comment. I studied environmental issues for 40 years since the Jimmy Carter administration. I just returned from Alaska, where I used to live. And again, it's 40 years of Reaganomics. We should have been, when Jimmy Carter said we want to get 20% renewable by the year 2000, get ourselves off fossil fuels, so we don't have to fight wars to protect imported oil. He was right on target. And then the Reagan administration came in and said, don't worry about it, we just import more oil. Quickly, oil is ocean sediment, it's plankton, it's 100 to 300 million years old. I studied to be a geologist in Texas, of all places, and we're running out. We've hit peak oil, but stream of consciousness. What they do in LA is they put the solar panels on your car, on your house or your home, and then you pay the installer or the solar panel manufacturer back instead of paying the energy bill. So, we're already doing some stuff, but we need to do more. And you guys are right on the mark. It's policy. We need to go back to a sane trade policy, which the founding fathers put into place to collect tariffs to balance our trade out. So you guys are right on the money. I mean, in Germany, they're apparently putting solar panels all over the place. They're all over the place in LA right now, but we need to do more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's stream consciousness real quickly. I mean, that's why important elections make a difference. Elections are important. And again, we're paying for the Reagan era, for the lack of sane trade policy, the lack of collecting trade tariffs, which funded our government, ignoring the environment, screwing trade. I hope I can say that on the air. And this is 40 years later, and so elections make a big difference. But I think I'm very hopeful. I get depressed about climate change every day. Here's why I'm hopeful. People don't argue with me about climate change anymore. I studied natural history in college. I studied to be a geologist at one point, and they don't argue about it anymore because we're seeing it right in front of our eyes. If you would have told me that all the car manufacturers would have gone solar this year or last
Electric.
year,
Yeah.
I'd say, no, it's not going to happen that quick. And it did. And
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like in Chicago, but here in LA, there's Teslas all over the place, and there are charging stations all over the place.
No.
Real quickly, I met a guy in Anchorage, Alaska, that has solar panels on his roof, and he's charging his electric car in the driveway with it. In Alaska, for example, we have more solar radiation than they do in Germany. Tom Harmon talks about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So It's totally doable. You guys are making the right comments, and I think we can turn the corner. I'm sorry, this is why I'm a Democrat. We need to get the House and the Senate back and maintain the White House, and we'll get things done.
There you go. Thanks, Mike.
Pressure
Appreciate
our
it.
congressmen and legislatures.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Appreciate the call, Mike. No, I mean, Mike's spot on. I mean, I go back to that moment Reagan ripped the solar panels off the White House. That was our commitment to oil for the next 40 years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we invented this technology. We had it on our House of Government, and now we depend on slave labor in a place halfway across the world to bring the stuff back to the United States. That's absolutely crazy, and Mike is right. So, the point about Germany is a very good one, because if Germany is not a low-cost country, as you know, Rick, right? It has strong unions, it has strong environmental regulations, but it found a way to scale up solar and to manufacture it domestically because it had a policy in place to not only bring solar online, but to produce it in Germany. By the way, Germany doesn't get nearly as much sunshine as most parts of the United States. So if they can do it there, we can do it here. I mean, it's as simple as that. It just takes policy, but it takes that level playing field on trade, which is why this case needs to work its way through its process without interference from these outside parties.
So last question, what do we do about it? I mean, clearly we don't want this to push through, but we want to make sure that we get it right. What should people be doing?
Rick, that's a great question. We have a petition on our website right now at americanmanufacturing.org to make sure that the Commerce Department knows that we believe that they should conduct a full and thorough investigation of this and ignore all the noise that's out there about the sky is falling on this, because it certainly is not. And we need to do the right thing. We need to make sure our trade laws are enforced and that we're making those solar panels right here in the United States. But americanmanufacturing.org, we have the petition, and they're going to start this investigation any day now, and they'll conclude it in August. So time is of the essence.
Great stuff. Scott, I appreciate the time. As always, great talk with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Likewise, Rick. Appreciated caller Mike as well. He made some great points.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Again, make sure you check out the website, americanmanufacturing.org. Sign the petition, help out that way, and maybe call your congressman and let them know as well. As always, remember, if you miss any of the show, make sure you grab the podcast, share it with your friends, subscribe, comment, make sure you give us a 5-star rating. As always, very helpful. We'll take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You know, it's interesting that Scott brings up or Mike actually brought up Germany and Scott as well. You know, I remember, and this has been years, Germany went all in on solar. Their billboards on the side of the road, those are huge solar panels. Your communities, that the entire community, every house in it, every store, every business had it in there, because what they would done is, I remember, you were able to sell back anything you generated. Communities were, subsidizing their tax base by selling back the excess energy that they were creating back to the grid. And I think it was something like 6 times the going, whatever the rate was. So like if it was a penny a kilowatt hour, let's just argue that's what it was. I don't know what it was, but let's say it was a penny. You got 6 cents back. So the incentive was to produce and conserve, and then sell back, because they clearly the energy company wouldn't then have to produce from other sources. So you were literally producing the energy for the energy company that they were then spreading out across the grid, which was helpful for the entire country, that they would use in other ways. And I remember saying years ago, and this is going back 7-8 years ago, that I was talking about this, maybe even 10 now that I'm thinking about it. Why can't we do stuff like this? No, actually it had to be 10, because it was right around the time that we put the solar panels on our house, and we did that back in 12. Because the state of Pennsylvania had a sunshine fund. If I remember, the Obama administration had some money to do it. So we got some subsidies in both places that made it a lot more affordable. Now, granted, the state of Pennsylvania completely boogered it up by not having the energy portfolio meet the demand. So what had been the solar energy renewable credits, the SRECs, at the time we bought were like $225 a credit. So for every kilowatt hour you created, you got like $225. It's down to like 7 now. It's almost not even worth tracking and doing the paperwork to get. But back then it was, because it was a significant portion of the state's energy portfolio. But Republicans, again, here in the state, didn't bother to increase it at all, and had no interest. In fact, if I remember, there was only one Republican, Representative Ross was his name. And I don't think he's there anymore. But he was the only Republican that was pushing to increase that, because he understood. Look, New Jersey just across the river, they're getting like $500 a credit, and the solar industry there is booming. There's nothing in Pennsylvania. There's not much left. In fact, the company that put our panels on, you can't get them to come out and service anything, because there's no money in it for them, because there's no industry left. And this is why you have to have the policy to back it all up. You have to have the parts. You have to have the production. It's all got to be here. And, I've got friends in California who say, yeah, it's booming out here, because the policy, the production, the brain power all have to be there together. You can't have one and not the other. And this is where, again, I keep coming back to, it's smart policy, sound investment, and good people. You can't miss any of that. And you certainly can't have lobby groups who are trying to kill it off, or take the low road, which is why I think, the lobby group for the solar industry just wants the cheapest inputs they can possibly get so they can make the most money off of it. At least that's my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available. Also share your thoughts with us by making a comment and leaving a rating. That simple.
New technology launched today is now mapping wildfire risk city to city and even house to house.
New national study shows wildfire risk doubling across the U.S. over the next 30 years.
Russia has deliberately decided to extend the military war against Ukraine into a war of grains, a so-called wheat war.
Extreme drought and Russia's war in Ukraine risk triggering global wheat shortage. Plus,
everything that needed to be done was done to fix the power grid in Texas.
Texas electric grid struggles in extreme heat.
I thought it struggles in extreme cold.
It struggles in both.
All of those struggles and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
You see, all week their stories were about down in Laguna. They said, fires are destroying multi-million-dollar homes. Or as we call them in California, homes.
Yep. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen. So Russia is not only using energy as a weapon, it's also using food.
Yes, unfortunately it is. In Europe on Saturday, Russia cut off electricity to neighboring Finland in retaliation for Finland's decision to apply for membership in NATO because of Russia's unjustified invasion of Ukraine.
Well, that'll show them.
Russia had provided Finland with about 10% of its electricity. Germany announced it plans to stop importing Russian oil by the end of the year, even if European Union member nations fail to agree on an EU-wide ban in its next set of sanctions.
Good.
Also in Europe, unprecedented drought is threatening wheat crops in Spain, Portugal, and France, forcing officials to institute water restrictions. France 24 reports that last week, France endured its first flash drought, a sudden onset of intense dryness and extreme heat that dried out soil and crops in just 5 days. That dampened hope that French wheat exports could ease shortfalls in global grain supplies that are caused by Russia's blockade of Ukraine's exports.
Flash drought?
Yes.
Someone's making that up.
Sadly, no, they're not. G7 leaders warned over the weekend that extreme weather damages plus Russia's war in Ukraine risk triggering a global food crisis.
Why not? Everything else is in crisis.
In New Mexico, the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon Complex fire in northern New Mexico has been burning for 40 days and is now the largest fire in the state's recorded history at more than 450 square miles. The fire has destroyed nearly 500 structures. Tens of thousands have been evacuated. Forecasters warn that fire weather conditions of extreme dryness, heat, high winds, and dry lightning will persist for days to come.
Any flash droughts?
And for the country as a whole, a new analysis of nationwide wildfire risk shows that man-made global warming will double the risk of wildfire across the entire United States. A first-of-its-kind analysis by nonprofit firm First Street includes a searchable database detailing wildfire risk that will be integrated into real estate websites. First Street found that at least half of all homes in the lower 48 will face an increased risk of wildfire over the next 30 years, the typical span of a mortgage. Studies show that climate change is escalating the frequency and intensity of wildfires, and it is getting worse. Broad swaths of the country not typically associated with wildfires are already under increased threat, according to the analysis.
But they're going to put this information into real estate websites so that consumers can actually check the risk of fire if they're considering a new home?
Exactly.
Good.
Most at risk is Florida because of its thick vegetation, followed by California, Texas, Arizona, and Oklahoma.
Florida will make it illegal to show that on a real estate website. I'm just betting.
The state of Texas squeaked by in an early test of its rickety electric grid amid extremely early extreme heat. Officials begged residents over the weekend and again on Monday to conserve electricity to prevent blackouts. Several major power plants were offline for scheduled repairs and maintenance to prepare for the brutal Texas summer, and then 6 power plants tripped offline over the weekend as the extreme heat rose, triggering price spikes in the state's notoriously unregulated market.
You know, I'm old enough to remember when Texas used to make fun of those California liberals because they couldn't keep the power on.
Speaking of California, on the last day of April, California hit a milestone. For a brief spell, renewable energy sources met 100% of California's electricity needs for the first time ever. Some of that power generation had to be curtailed because there wasn't enough battery storage and transmission lines to carry it, but briefly hitting 100% clean electricity in the nation's most populous state shows it can be done if we try.
Meanwhile, they can barely keep the power on in Texas. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm going to tell you, interesting day in Congress today. And this is one of those moments where you go, you know, with inflation raging, with, baby formula not being on the shelves the way it should be, with the problems that we've got, I don't know that the House subcommittee should be having a hearing on UFOs. I think it sends the wrong message. But hey, it is what it is. Maybe some subcommittee hearings on taxing the rich. I think that's a good place to start. We should go there. We should have that hearing every day until we actually do something, especially when you look at Bezos's tweets yesterday. I think that's a good start. Just my thoughts. And here to share some thoughts on maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I've asked our good friend Morris Pearl to come talk with us. Morris is the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, their website, patrioticmillionaires.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can check that out. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be in your show, Rick. Thank you.
So what do you think? The UFO subcommittee hearings, I don't know. I'm a little weirded out by that.
Yeah, I didn't go to the UFO hearing, but we are promoting yet another bill to tax the rich. They're putting into legislative language several variations of Biden's proposal that people who are wealthy beyond some certain amount should be paying taxes every single year, not just when they eventually die or sell their assets or something. Same way you pay your taxes every single year, Rick. Rich people should too.
And it's one of those things that I think seems fair, especially yesterday after we talked about the fact that CEO pay has gone up yet again. And yet, how many years has it been since we've raised the minimum wage? 12, 13? I've almost lost count of how long it's been since the minimum wage last increased.
Yeah, take inflation into account, the minimum wage hit its peak in the mid-1960s, Rick, and hasn't gone up since then. We've been protesting in front of restaurant shareholder meetings just this week, suggesting they just should talk about raising the minimum wage. And here in New York, they can pay people just the greater of their tips or the minimum wage, not tips plus the minimum wage, as we think it should be.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those things that I think most people think it is how it works, and because it's how it should be. It should be you make a wage, and then those tips are above and beyond. But it's not how that works. That $2.13 an hour, that whopping wage, that whopping minimum wage on the federal level of $2.13, or where I live here in Pennsylvania, $2.96 an hour. I don't know how you live on that.
Yeah, when you walk into IHOP or Denny's or any of those restaurants and you leave a tip, unless the person's doing very well, that just goes to decrease how much money the restaurant owner has to pay them, not to increase their take-home pay at all. Which is very sad, and we want to change it.
Yeah, but again, it's this idea of reward for work and respect for work. And you guys have done a piece here that, common sense to me, if you want to keep your workers around, pay them. That seems like common sense. It seems like something that employers should intrinsically know. And in fact, there was a hearing not too long ago with Teamsters President Sean O'Brien Amazon Labor Union President Christian Smalls and our friend Greg Leroy from Good Jobs First, where Mike Braun, the senator from Indiana, literally shocked me when he talked about just this very thing, where he said, when he hired people, that he paid the best wages, he had the best benefits, because he wanted people to stay, he wanted people to be part of the family, so to speak. And if, we all lived in his world, there'd be no need for unions or for laws or any of that. People would be treated decently. Sadly, we don't live in that world.
I wish I did live in that world, because I don't want to live in a world with people who can't pay their bills and people who don't have enough money to live on, because that's not going to help me. That's not going to help me invest in businesses and make money. Now again, I go back to yesterday's story.
I think right now that was the average pay of the CEOs went up to like $14.7 million at the top end, some outrageous number. And look, I know people are going to say, but Rick, you can't begrudge them of the wealth that they create. And look, if everyone else were making a living wage, I'd go, okay. But this idea that someone's worth, 400 times what the average worker is making, 1,000 times more than the average worker, I just don't think that I think there's a fairness problem here. And this is where, especially when you start talking about, them not paying the same tax rate as their secretary is, there's kind of a problem here, isn't there?
There is. It's just not fair. I mean, the bill we're proposing in Congress now is that anyone who is wealthier than 1,000 times the median wealth in our country, that would get you up to about $120-something million. If you have more than $120-something million in wealth, you should be paying taxes every year on how much money you make, not just wait until you sell your stock or whatever.
And how would that look? Because I've had people say, well, but they don't make any money. Like Jeff Bezos doesn't really make any money. He doesn't have a salary. We don't, he just has all this wealth sitting in stock and stuff, because I don't think the average person understands, how folks like you, how you make your money.
Well, what we're going to say, and Jeff Bezos makes billions of dollars every year with his stock going up, with his ownership of Amazon becoming more and more valuable. So we're proposing a law that after $125 million, that as he gets richer, he should be paying 2 or 4% of that increase in his wealth to the Treasury. And that would make things a little bit more fair. He'd still be really rich, don't get me wrong, but it would make things a little bit more fair and make things a little bit less unequal between the really rich and guys who work for a living.
Are there any places that already do this? I mean, are there any examples of where this happens?
They did try this in France. It didn't work very well because they had middle-class homeowners paying taxes on their homes going up in value. But we're proposing only for the top 10th of 1%. People who make people who have wealth 1,000 times more than the median wealth in our country. That's a tiny number of people, and we believe that those small number of really rich people should be paying more.
So what do you say to the person who goes, but we shouldn't be just targeting just a handful of people? That would be unconstitutional.
Well, I don't think it would be unconstitutional. Income taxes started with just the very wealthy. Very few people paid income taxes in the 1920s and 30s. It was only expanded to include pretty much everybody during World War II. So I don't think it would be unconstitutional. And I think everybody's going to pay some taxes, but we think that those people who are really rich should pay more taxes than those people like you who work for a living, Rick. Yeah. That's what I tell people.
Now, what about the corporate end of things? I mean, we look at the corporate tax. They lowered down to 21%. They didn't close many loopholes. I look at someone like like Amazon, for instance, since we're talking about Bezos. They've walked away from and pocketed a good bit of change over the years. In fact, some years made billions of dollars and paid zero taxes. Do we continue to allow that, or is there a way to claw that back? I mean, you go back to the golden age of when America was great. Some of my friends say, that Norman Rockwell era of the 50s, the corporate tax rate was somewhere in the 50% range.
There are things we can do, and we think we should do them. We've been endorsing laws to change some of those things for a while now with our Patriotic Millionaires group. And we think that something can be done. Read Warren Buffett's letters from right after the 2017 Tax Cuts Act was passed. He'll tell you The reason that Berkshire Hathaway has done so well and gone up in value so much over the last 5 years is because they're paying less taxes. That's a large reason why I am wealthier now than I was then, is because I own stock in companies, and that stock is more valuable because the tax rates the companies pay has gone down. And that's why I'm getting richer.
But here's the thing, Morris. This is what we've been sold. And now, again, I don't buy it, but the line we've been sold is that having wealthier companies and letting companies have more resource, they're smart. They know what to do with money. They're going to invest it better. They're going to create more jobs. And in the long run, it's going to benefit, people like me who have to work for those companies. That's what we've been sold. Is that the reality?
Well, the first part is true. They are smart. And if you give them more money, they will invest it well, and they'll make yet more money. And they'll be richer. That doesn't mean you'll be richer. If you own stock in companies, yeah, that'll be good for you if you're on the owner's side of it. If you're on the worker's side of it, at best, that won't make any difference to you at all. Don't forget, companies pay taxes on profits. Profits are calculated after salaries are deducted. And so it doesn't even make any sense, because if they pay more salaries, they'll pay less taxes automatically. That's the way the tax system works. They don't pay pay more salaries because they pay less taxes. It works the other way around. You deduct the salaries and wages, then they calculate how much taxes they have to pay. So if they wanted to pay more money, they'd automatically pay less taxes. It's just total nonsense with the stuff these people are trying to tell you, Rick.
Yeah, no, because I've made the argument that by giving these companies all of this tax breaks and all this money, they've actually lowered wages because they want to squeeze more out of it. And it's actually hurt the working class a lot more than it ever could have helped, because now they're telling us. I look at UPS, took $2 billion and bought back their stocks. For me, as a working class person, that's kind of like admitting we had nothing better to do with this money at all. We couldn't buy new trucks. We couldn't buy new facilities. We couldn't invest this money in any more productive way possible other than making our stock price more worth more and enriching ourselves. There was nothing more we could do with this money than what we've decided to, and that's just to enrich our shareholders and ourselves.
When they say buy back stock, they mean sending money to the owners. And that's what they're doing. When they pay less taxes, there's more money left for the owners. That seems fairly simple to me. And if government policies that people that own companies should make more money, well, yeah, lower their taxes then. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a objective for government policies. I think government policies should be that people who work for a living should make more money. That's what I suggest.
So here's the thing. I mean, it sounds like you're talking about we're in the middle of a class war. Anytime I talk about class war, I get a pushback because there is a war between capital and labor. Capital is winning. The pendulum has swung way on the side of Wall Street and in the investor class, and away from people who work, which is why we haven't seen a minimum wage increase in more than a decade, which is why we've seen unions being crushed over the last 30, 40 years, which is why we see a lot of the things that have gone on over these years. Curious your thoughts to that.
Well, I wish we were in the middle of a class war. I think we're kind of towards the end of a class war, and the investor class is mostly already won. And yeah, I mean, hopefully President Biden, if he has a few different senators next year, can go on a different path and maybe take back a little bit. But yeah, I think we should have a class war, because I think that the people that work for a living are falling way behind, and they need to catch up. They need to vote themselves raises. There's going to be referendum on the ballot in several states like Michigan this coming year that people can go and vote to raise the minimum wage. And hopefully they will. And hopefully our government will see that people want to make more money, and hopefully they'll change. I don't know. They haven't yet.
Yeah, hopefully we'll wake up. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Morris Pearl, the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires. Millionaires.org is their website. We'll get links out on social media. Also, make sure you check out their book, The aptly titled Tax the Rich, How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Makes the Rich Even Richer, at patrioticmillionaires.org. You can get a copy of that book, highly suggested, and maybe give it to some of your friends. It makes a nice gift. So back to this piece of legislation you're moving. How do we make sure that people get on board with this and pushing our representatives to get on board? Because I'm a firm believer in, look, it's got to be pressure from us. It's got to be pressure from the working class that makes these representatives go, hey, my job could be on the line if I don't get behind this. What do we do?
Well, most of the Democrats are on the side of taxing the rich. Almost all the Republicans are not. I think at least you should do is ask your representative at a town hall or something, are you in favor of raising taxes on the very rich? And tell them what you think. And if enough people ask them, then maybe they'll get the idea. That's what we're hoping.
Maybe they'll get the idea. Well, I hope so. But Morris, as always, I appreciate the time. I hope folks will check out the book, Tax the Rich. Love the title. How Lies, Loopholes, and Lobbyists Make the Rich Even Richer. You can get that at patrioticmillionaires.org. Morris Pearl, I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you, Rick. Great to be in your show.
As always, great stuff. Seriously, check out the book, Tax the Rich. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Quick break, right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I love the title of the book, Tax the Rich. Tax the rich, absolutely, without question, we should be taxing them. And not just 1 or 2% either. I mean, we need to go back to the good socialist president, David Eisenhower, and get into that 92% range. Start using that money a little bit more productively. Let's quick get a call. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, what's on your mind?
I'll tell you exactly what's on my mind. I went and voted today.
Amen.
And apparently the Democratic Party here in my little county, it does not get out any info because there were several write-ins, like the representative.
Mark Kritz?
For the federal, and apparently when they redid the district, and several other things. And so I asked the girls. I said, "Hey, do we have one of the copies of the ballot? Because there's several things on here that it's right in, and I'm trying to see if anyone is running or anything." And she brought me the sample ballot. Nothing. And I'm like, well, no wonder we're losing, because the party is falling down on the job. They're not getting out any information at all. So I wrote in Connor Lamb for better him than Rosenthal, because I voted for Fetterman for senator.
Right.
But this is the problem. They're falling down on the job.
Well, I mean, that's a local party thing. Here's the solution. Take it over.
Oh,
Alice for chair.
About that.
I'm right there. Alice for chair. Alice for chair, Alice for chair, Alice for chair. This is how we take over the party. We get people like you in charge, and we run it. We run it the right way. We get active, engaged, educated people to take over the party. And look, on the Republican side as well, want sane, rational people taking over the Republican Party. Take them somewhere back to the sane line. Let's take both parties in a direction that helps working people do the right thing. What do you say?
Yeah, I know. I need to get involved. My dad used to be involved in the local Democrat Party. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of unhappy people. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Alice. I appreciate it. No, I mean, at the end of it, this is a problem, and we need active, engaged people taking over this stuff. And yeah, there's a bunch of write-ins. I know in the 13th Congressional District in Pennsylvania, where I'm at, I know Mark Kritz, a former congressman, was a name that they were circulating to put in as a write-in because they didn't get, the chaos of running elections. But here's the thing. This is the problem, and this is where taxing the rich is so important. And I go back to the Supreme Court on Monday, another Supreme Court decision. Why the court is so important, 6-3, all the crazy corporatists on one side, the three Democratic appointees on the other. Now, you gotta love this. Now, if you're a rich candidate, like here in Pennsylvania, we got 3 rich guys running for Senate. Dr. Quack lent himself a whole bunch of money, somewhere around $15 million. McCormick loaned himself $11 million, and this Sands woman, I guess, lent herself $3.9 million for her campaign. In the past, you weren't allowed to get more than $250,000 of that loan get paid back on the other side. Now, thanks to this decision, after it's over, after you're on the other side, once you win, once you get on the other side, you can now go back to these wealthy donors and have them pay you every penny of it back. Think about that. Now, understand, there are caps in place for the general election. And I think it's still, like $2,900? So a rich guy can only give you $2,900, per pre-election for the primary and for the general. That's it. But if you loan yourself millions of dollars, after the election is over, you can go back to that rich guy and go, oh, hey, by the way, I got all these loans I got to pay back. After the fact, they can give you all that money now, thanks to our Supreme Court. Let that sink in for a minute. If you thought running for office was like polo for the rich before, oh my goodness. This is going to be the stomping ground of the very wealthy, because average everyday working people, they're never going to be able to loan themselves millions of dollars to run a campaign. It's not going to happen. Arizona, you've got the Republican businessman Jim Lamon running for Senate, loaned himself $13 million. If he wins, he's going to get on the other side. He's going to get it all back, because the investor class, they never lose. And you know whose money that is? It's ours, because we've given it all of that, the wealth, in massive tax breaks. And I love John Roberts, the Chief Justice's thoughts in the majority opinion, where he said the government is unable to identify a single case of quid pro quo corruption in the context of this kind of payback. Really? Oh, and of course, the decision is retroactive. So it's going to apply to this election cycle. Again, the rich getting richer and the poor, well, not so much. And speaking of the rich doing things, we now find out that Facebook funded an effort to fight the antitrust regulations that were going after them. Record again. Facebook funded American Eagle, which was out there, one of those good conservative think tanks. They were out there, appearing to be a grassroots group, anti-regulation group, antitrust regulation group. Yeah, a Facebook front. Because, these big companies, they fear us going, maybe we should be breaking up these giant conglomerates. Maybe we shouldn't have these massive enterprises having so much power. Maybe it's a bad thing to have monopoly. Maybe we'll wake up. I'm not sure when, but again, this Supreme Court decision, again, it's all about the money. Just made the rich a little bit richer. And our politics, a lot more expensive. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Share your thoughts. If you got any questions, comments, I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you check out the podcast. Share that with your friends and neighbors. Also, make a comment or two. Back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1954. That was the day the U.S. Supreme Court handed down their decision in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. In the unanimous decision, the court declared that racial segregation in public education was illegal. The case was filed for Linda Brown, a student who had been denied enrollment in her local elementary school because she was black. The court's decision overturned the concept of separate but equal. This legal basis for discrimination and segregation had been established by the Supreme Court earlier in their 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson decision. The Brown decision overturned nearly 6 decades of legally sanctioned racism. The American Federation of Teachers filed an amicus brief or friend of the court brief in support of the Brown family. The union's motion stated, quote, "The American Federation of Teachers, whose 60,000 classroom teacher members represent the group which does the actual work of teaching the nation's children, is committed to a practice of complete equality between teachers and children of every race. This principle is written indelibly in its Constitution and bylaws." In addition, the United Federation of Teachers of New York City also filed a brief with the court in support of Brown. Even after the court's decision, school desegregation did not come easy. Mobs of angry white Southerners showed up at schools to protest the admission of black students. In 1957, the National Guard had to protect 9 black students attempting to enroll in school in Little Rock, Arkansas. The United Teachers Union led the American Federation of Teachers to expel Southern Union locals that refused to abide by the desegregation decision. The Brown decision helped to launch the civil rights movement. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @laborhistoryin2.
When Supreme Court member Sam Alito's secret plan for canceling the constitutional right of women to end their pregnancies leaked out to the public, Republican politicos went ballistic. Over the leak, that is. The court's Republican Chief Justice John Roberts called the unauthorized disclosure, quote, "an affront to the majesty of the Supremes." Likewise, Republican congressional leaders have furiously demanded to know who done it and why. Way beyond the political screeching and posturing, however, a Pennsylvania woman quietly wrote a letter to the New York Times that calmly posed a couple of honest, more fundamental questions. Why are Supreme Court votes and processes so hidden in the first place? And how did this grip on secrecy become so sacrosanct? After all, as important and enormously powerful as this tiny judicial body is, it's still a governmental agency doing public business that affects every American. So the legal work that the 9 members of this ultimate judicial authority do, including their internal machinations to reach such awesome decisions as nullifying fundamental human rights, ought to be transparent to all who will be affected. The ugly truth is that today's third branch of government has needlessly, dangerously, and rather ludicrously become a black-robed autocracy. Bear in mind that these 9 individuals are enrobed for life, make up their own rules of ethical conduct, operate almost entirely behind closed doors, and the bare majority of only 5 of them can arbitrarily overrule presidents, congresses, states, other courts, voters, and your own personal life decisions. This is Jim Hightower saying, and now comes a GOP majority of Supreme Justices determined to entrench corporate plutocracy, right-wing theocracy, and Republican sovereignty over all of us. That's why we must finally lift the medieval level of secrecy the partisan judges are using to shroud their actions.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, at the beginning of May, more than 150 D.C. circulator bus operators, members of ATU Local 689. They hit the picket line demanding better wages, hours, conditions, basically respect. Because remember, we're coming out of that little pandemic thing. You may remember it. That period where we were calling all these people who had to work through the pandemic, essential. We were calling them frontline heroes. And these folks, more than anyone, they were on the front lines. They were the ones who made sure all of the other heroes, all of the other essential folks, like the nurses and the people who work at the clinics and at the grocery stores and all those, they were the ones who made sure those folks could get to their jobs. And now there's that moment where they're going, hey, you know what? We demand better wages, hours, and conditions, and good on them. They just ratified their contract, ending the strike, obviously, and now beginning to move forward. And here to share some thoughts on, what it took to get to this point, I've asked Sherry Semmelsberger to come talk with us. Sherry is the Secretary-Treasurer of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. TTD.org is their website if you want to check out the work that they do there. Sherry, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So this is a pretty big victory, I think. I see this and I go, all during the pandemic, we were hearing these horror stories of, these bus drivers and these transit workers who were being infected, and there was almost no one there to help them, especially in the heart of it at the beginning, except their unions. And it's good to see that they're standing up and saying, you know what, you called us heroes. It's time to start treating us that way.
Absolutely. I think it's been long overdue to have those voices heard. It was good, and I was very proud and honored to be able to actually stand out there with them on their picket line.
But the shame of it is it shouldn't have to get to this. You shouldn't have to risk your job. You shouldn't have to go on strike. This should have been something that this company, these people just said, you know what? We respect, we honor you, we respect the sacrifices that you made. Because look, they got good raises, they got good benefits, and I was looking through some of it, stuff that isn't out of bounds. It should have been something that should not have gotten to this point.
Right.
At least that's my view.
Basic. Absolutely, should have just been basic. And unfortunately, that is what we're seeing all across America now. And these workers are coming together, and they are letting their voices be heard. And I'm very proud of that.
Now, as someone who's spent as much time in the labor movement as you have, and we'll talk about how you get into this in a little bit, but we're starting to see finally that sense of power of workers saying, you know what, we did come out of this pandemic. We are what you said we are. We are frontline heroes. We are essential, and it's time that you guys start treating us as such. So I tend to believe, and I expect that we're going to see a lot more of this, of people saying, no, we're not going to take the paltry raises. We're certainly not going to take concessionary contracts. None of that's going to happen anytime soon. I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that these companies need a reality check. They want to keep gaining these profits and deteriorating at the expense of the workers. And it's not right. And they're tired of it. They're frustrated, and they're coming out and they're putting the pressure on them. And I'm proud to see that.
In cities across this country, and I remember during the heart of the pandemic, just some of the horror stories that these transit workers had to deal with. And this is where, again, as society, we've got to wake up to the reality that, these are our friends, our neighbors, our family members, that they're us. We should be treating them and all of us with dignity and respect. Because I don't know if you've noticed it, but as we've opened back up, as we've gone back to quote unquote normal, we're not normal anymore. I mean, I think people's fuses are a little bit shorter. I think we need to learn to deal with each other a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're starting to see that, and arms are locking, and solidarity is being heard, and it's coming back strong.
Yeah, and the good thing about this, and this is that moment where, out of this, the idea of unionizing, the idea of solidarity, I've said this for the last couple of of crisis that we had 2008 when that happened into 2009. I said, is this the moment, that spark that's going to draw working people back together? And it really wasn't. We hadn't done the grassroots organizing yet. I see this as that kind of moment where I think the conditions are right for people to start saying, no, you know what? Maybe we do need to start uniting around the idea that we all deserve a living wage. We all deserve health security, retirement security, dignity, respect, the kind of things that, people like you and I have been fighting for decades.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And what I love most of all is how it's coming across in various industries. And you don't have to be, that worker in that industry to show your support. You're seeing it with the miners. The flight attendant president, Sarah Nelson, she went down and stood with the miners that have been on strike, and that really speaks volumes. You are coming together not because you know each other personally, but because you have a common ground. And you understand it, and you're fighting together.
Yeah, Sarah's amazing, and we've had her on the program another number of times, and she's a good friend. I love her passion. I love her intellect. I love her ability to message, because that's the way forward for the working class of this country, of standing together. That old Knights of Labor idea of a concern of one being a concern of all. An injury to one, an injury to all. And I think we're seeing that across industries. Now, your industry, obviously the Transportation Trades Department there of the AFL, looking at transportation, public transit being part of it, the rail service being another part. You look at, a lot of our supply chain issues. You look at a lot of the things that are going on, especially with inflation. And it comes back down to transportation. It comes back down to the regulatory destruction that's happened over the last 40 years, and the destruction of what used to be, the basis of what was known as the middle class in this country, which were good, solid, unionized jobs in trucking and in transit and on the railroads and in public transit. It's about now rebuilding that sector and rebuilding those jobs. So when I see a victory like this, it gives me hope that the future is going to be bright for future workers and the economy as a whole. Absolutely.
And I think that message is out there now. And you are seeing it. I feel like every day in the news, there's a mention of workers wanting to organize, and they're fighting strong for it. And they're getting out there, and they're putting the pressure on these companies. And it's great to see. It really is.
Yeah. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Sherry Semmelsberger. She's the Secretary-Treasurer of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. Make sure you check out their website, ttd.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Sherry, you and I share something of a common background. We both went and graduated from the National Labor College. For me, I went because I love the labor movement. I want to help grow and help people lead the kind of lifestyle that I've been able to lead throughout my lifetime. And I say it all the time around the program. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. We were where they put the socioeconomic ladder on top of. And I now live in a neighborhood with doctors and lawyers. And I credit that with, one, my hard work, obviously, but two, the fact that I've always had a union contract that made sure that work was compensated at the highest possible wage I could get, with good health security and good retirement security, that when I get older, I'm not going to have to worry as much as sadly most workers in this country. And I want that for everyone. So we share that common bond that, the National Labor College is one of the places that we got a little bit of information. I think it's an interesting little bit between us.
Yeah, it is. I was actually able to go back to college while working for Transportation Trades, which was great. I got my bachelor's degree while working full time.
Yeah, I did too. It's one of those things where we were able to do some of it, and it was a good mixed program that I really liked. But the important part for me was the relationships that I came across, and the idea of being around people who want to build the same kind of movement forward and give people the same kind of opportunity. And the reason I really like talking with other labor people is I think they have the same kind of mentality that I have. It's about getting things done that make people's lives better. It's, I don't meet many selfish people in the labor movement. It's all about how we can make, not just, hey, I made it to where I've made it, kick the ladder off the side of the building and slam the door behind me. It's how do we replicate that and get people the ability to, to lead the kind of lives that we've led. And I think that's important as well.
Yeah, it absolutely is. That's why, when I showed up to that strike with Local 689 ATU, my great-grandfather, when he came from Italy, that was his very first job, was with Local 689, working on the streetcar tracks here in DC. He was able to raise a family of, I said 6. It actually was 7 when I went back. My mom is actually one of 6, but so to raise the family of 7 on a union job, wages and benefits, and that I was able to pay that respect back full circle. That was the beginning foundation of a lot of history with my family throughout throughout the labor movement, and I was very, very honored to be able to show up. We took food and drinks there for the workers. Greg Regan, our president, our chief of staff, Matt Colvin, joined as well. And we were able to sit and talk to them and show our support. And we were very proud to do that.
Yeah. It's about sharing that story, though, because that's an important one. You go back and we have this idealized version of what the 50s and 60s were, the Norman Rockwell era. You hear the Trump supporters talk about make America great, and they usually point back to that period. But that period was the height of the power and prosperity of the working class, the most prosperous working class, not just in the history of this country, but I would argue in the history of human civilization. That someone who was doing working as a truck driver or a transit worker or working on the railroads or in the coal mines or in the steel mills or whatever industry they were in, you could support a family on one income, 40 hours a week. You could do all of the things that the American dream, we were told, you buy the house with the white picket fence, the 2.3 kids with the dog and the new car and vacations every year, send your kids to college, retire with dignity and respect. That is now just a dream because you can't do that much anymore. And This is where having these conversations and reminding people it is possible because we've done it in the past. And how did we do it? We did it with strong unions and strong union members.
Right. And having that voice and standing together. You don't cross a picket line, you get out and you walk it with them. And that's happening. It's coming back. And that's what we're seeing, and like I said, it's exciting. It really is, because I do think it got lost there for a while.
And this is one, I was looking through some of your background, and you have an extensive family history of people working in unions, and that's how things used to be. Everybody knew somebody who was a union and in a union. And I remember growing up in the projects, when you saw someone get that union job at Ford or Chevy in Cleveland, immediately their lives got better. So even as a small kid, 7, 8 years old, I saw firsthand union job, better life. That's how it worked, because you saw immediately their lives got better. They had food at the end of the month, which in my neighborhood was not a certainty. The kids got secondhand bikes, they got better clothing. Eventually they got a secondhand car, and eventually they moved up and out altogether because of the wages that were earned. And, that's an important message to be sending along. For me, union job, better life is the message.
It is. It absolutely is. And that's why I think that this is happening, because they're seeing these profit margins get wider for these companies, and workers are saying, I'm not going to sit out here. You're not going to overwork me, increase my hours, and decrease my pay and benefits. This isn't going to happen anymore.
I mean, that's got to be the message going forward. So,
absolutely,
when you're out talking to people, what's the message for young people who may not understand what unions are, what they do? Because look, sadly, I can guarantee you the kid that's growing up in the house that I grew up as a kid doesn't have a neighbor who has access to get a union job. They're not seeing the things that I saw, sadly. What's that response to that kid, to those people who didn't get to see it firsthand, that you want to engage, that you say, look, this is the path forward. What is that message?
Yeah, the path forward is union, and it's to unionize and to collectively come together and to demand that there are good jobs with good wages and good benefits, and together you can do it. Stick together and you can do it.
Yeah, I go back to the old
union
argument.
Is where it is.
I go back to the old argument of my grandfather's generation. We can make every job a good job. Even those crappy jobs in the steel mills that were nasty and dirty and dangerous. They turned those from poverty wage jobs into solidly middle class jobs. My grandfather was a truck driver for his whole life. Started off shoveling coal off the back of a coal truck for 17 cents an hour. And when he retired with the dignity of a defined benefit pension, and was able to live the rest of his life in a home that he purchased, that he could have never imagined his life would go the way it went, all because of that union card and the empowerment that came out of it. And I think that this generation, it's about empowering workers to say, you know what? We should have a voice, not just in the workplace, but all of society as well. Empowered, engaged, educated. Nothing more dangerous than empowered, engaged, and educated workers.
Right? Exactly.
It is that simple. But Sherry, I appreciate the time you've given us and the work that you guys do over at the Transportation Trades Department. Keep it up. I hope you'll come back and share some more with us down the road.
Sure will. Thank you for having me.
Outstanding stuff. Thank you so much, Sherry Samuelsberger. She is the Secretary Treasurer there at the Transportation Trades Department, AFL-CIO. Make sure you check out their website, ttd.org is that site. We'll get links out on social media so you can check it out. If you missed any program, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available, wherever you get your favorites, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. It's always there, always available. Make sure you grab it, subscribe, share, and give us a comment. 5-star rating would be nice as well. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1838. The second anti-slavery convention of American women was being held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. For a while, a group of anti-slavery abolitionists had difficulty finding a venue in the city willing to host their convention. Discouraged by their plight, they had decided to build their own facilities. They raised money, built, and christened their new building Pennsylvania Hall. It opened on May 14th, and just 4 days later, a pro-slavery mob circled the new hall. Alarmed by the unrest, the mayor of Philadelphia convinced the abolitionists to move their meeting away from Pennsylvania Hall. The angry mob burned Pennsylvania Hall to the ground. One observer noted, describing the scene, flames burst in rolling masses from the windows. Soon the whole building was enveloped in one dense, dark-colored sheet of flame. Undeterred by the violence, the abolitionist women moved their meeting to a large private home. One of those scheduled to speak was Sarah T. Smith. Her eloquent words stood in stark contrast to the ugliness that took place at Pennsylvania Hall. She began her speech by saying, "We are told that it is not within the province of women to discuss the subject of slavery, that it is a political question, and we are stepping out of our sphere when we take part in its discussion. It is not true that it is merely a political question. It is likewise a question of justice, of humanity, of morality, of religion." She went on to say it was a matter of whether the laborer shall receive the reward of his labor or be driven by unrequited toil. In the end, those who lit the fire that reduced Pennsylvania Hall to ashes could not quell the fire for justice that was lit by the abolitionists' cause. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So to pick up on what Sherry was talking about, you look at this and, for me, the messaging in this moment, the messaging is empowering people to stand up and say enough already. Coming out of the pandemic, I'm hoping that people realize that nothing's given, that you have to demand better wages, hours, conditions. You have to demand, respect and dignity. I think back, and I talk about my grandparents' generation a lot because they built something, and they built it together. They didn't always agree. No, not even close. But the one thing that they did demand is solidarity in the workplace. They understood, and viscerally, they understood who the enemy was. And that was the wealth class. That was the Wall Street class. We've been trained over these years to go, no, we want to be them. We idolize wealth. It's in everything that we see on TV, all the glitz and glamour. And, I had someone mention this to me the other day, and it makes sense. When I was a kid, if you showed something off, if you bragged about anything, you got mocked and you got beat up, or bad things happened. You didn't have the glitz and the bragging. You didn't have the bragging. You didn't have the trash talking. I was watching one of these, the videos, like on Instagram. And this guy was, hey, there's a fifth grader, and he's, the best fifth grade basketball player in the entire world. And look at him do these amazing things for a fifth grader. And look at him talk trash. When I was a fifth grader, if someone would have done any of the things that kid did, all other 9 kids on the court would have beat him senseless. No, you can't say that, Rick. No, that's how the society was. And they weren't bullying him. You didn't get away with being that kind of a person, and we're idolizing people who are jerks, and I don't think that's good for society. We're idolizing the person who's taking everything away. I think back to my grandparents' generation. They shared a lot more. They were a lot more sharing. They were a lot more communal. We've been trained Reagan forward, my generation especially, and then every generation since, that it's all about you. It's greed is good. The one who dies with the most toys wins. That kind of hyper-individual mentality. That's not good for society. That cutthroat competition, not good. Competition is good. I'm one of the most competitive people you will meet, but I'm not going to lie, cheat, and steal to get ahead. And not because I'm special, but because I grew up in an era where everybody followed the rules and everybody held you to them. So as a matter of society, there were guardrails that you didn't go over. Today, we're saying, no, guardrails don't matter. And this is where I think there's got to be, if we're going to move somewhere forward, I think there's got to be some discussion of what common values are. And then start looking at ostracizing those who don't play by common values. The fact that there are people who are idolizing someone like Musk or Bezos, wow. Especially with the kind of wealth that they have and the kind of problems they could solve, the kind of legacy that they could leave behind. It's quite remarkable to me that we as a society don't demand more. And this is where, for me, a tax code. If you're not going to do it voluntarily, we're going to do it because we need it, because it's what should be done. I can't believe he said that. He's talking about redistribution of wealth. Yes, he is. He's been talking about that for a very long time, because it is that simple. We do need to invest in healthcare and education that doesn't saddle a generation with massive debt like we've done. We've saddled a generation with healthcare debt. There's so much that needs to be done. And what have we done? We've created a glutton class where it's greed is good, more for them. And the heck with the rest of us. It's time for us to hold everyone else in check. Just my thought. Love to hear yours, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of today's program, make sure you download the podcast there at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. Thanks so much for being here. See you next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com.